Welcome back to Ministers in the Making. This is John Carolus with my co-host.
Paul Horstmeyer.
And today we are talking about an exciting new topic.
Yes, very exciting. It is about our new class that we just got done with last week. It was our winter term class, so a short 2-week intensive. And John and I, we both took it, but we were in different sections. So I'm excited to hear about your thoughts and reactions about it all. So should we dive right in?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick thank you to the patience of our listeners who maybe they were waiting with great expectation at the SoundCloud button or the podcast notifications, waiting for a new one to come out. But we just took a few weeks off here, guys. So for those of you that
I require a 3-week vacation with any job that I have. So
yeah, so for those of you that couldn't handle the wait, we apologize, and we won't do it again until July when we have to take a 12-month hiatus.
Exactly.
But we'll see. So anyways, back to this course, Leadership Immersion. It's a 2-week course over the winter break that we have here at the seminary. Paul, why don't you tell us about the general parameters of the course?
Yeah, so let's see. We were split up into, I think, the first and second years were the ones taking this, and split up into sort of 4 sections, and you'd either be sort of all day, from the morning 8 to 12 every day, or afternoon 1 to 5. And besides the first day class where we met on campus and got sort of oriented, and they let us know what the class is going to be about, because again, first time anyone's doing this. The rest of the week of the first week, we were in a congregation, and we sort of had still like lecture style and presentations, with the first part of the morning or the first part of the class being led by the professor, giving a presentation about a certain topic about church administration or leadership. They'd present for about an hour, and then the rest of the time would be the pastor at the church, the pastor of the church, giving a presentation, sort of giving the real life examples and application of the topic that we chose. So like when we talked about the dynamics of a smaller church and what that sort of impact that has on the day-to-day tasks and different considerations to make and decisions and all of that stuff, the pastor there would give his insights on what the small church dynamic would look like. And yes, that's pretty much what we did. The first week we were at what would be like a small to medium-sized church. So I think the church I was at was worshiping about like 120 on a Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the second week was a larger church, and I think they said they worship about 800 or so.
Sure.
So, yeah, but that's pretty much the gist of it. Again, an intensive, 4 hours at a time, and we just get a lot, go really in depth to, a few topics each day. We did the same topic at the small church, and then the next week we would do the same topic. But
right, yeah, they kind of had it broken up into 5 specific topics. On the 2 Mondays, we talked about congregational size dynamics, and then on Tuesdays we talked about teamwork and sort of being an assistant pastor or support staff, or how to work with them. And then on Wednesday, we talked about church governance and different models of organizational structure, like councils, boards,
elders,
policy-based governance, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Thursday, it was strategic planning, long-term, visionary sort of discussion, road mapping. And then on Fridays, we talked about finances. So you were at a small church the first week and a large church the second week. It was the same thing with my class. We met in the mornings. An interesting thing, though, about my first week with the class was we were at a church that was what's called a church revitalization congregation, where it was a church that was built in the 40s, sort of in the boom after World War II, when the U.S. as a country was doing very well economically, doing very well. Just the morale was high.
Mm-hmm.
The social situation seemed to be fairly peaceful. it was kind of before a lot of the civil rights movement and things kind of picked up in the 60s, and so there's a lot of churches being built. This was one of them. And then in the 80s and 90s, it declined a whole lot, and now they were dealing with a church worshiping about 50 people, and they had a sanctuary that could fit 450 people in it. So it was interesting. We were in that sort of environment. The second week, we were at a church that kind of took a big risk 10, 15 years ago, and it sort of has paid off numbers-wise. They've got a lot more people coming to church every Sunday or Saturday night. They've expanded to sort of another location, and so they were unique in that way. In that, it was a storied church. The first week we had this storied, historical, old church that had gone through some ups and downs and was trying to make its way back to a sort of self-sustaining number of members. So why don't you talk about your first week being in the small church, the effect that had on your understanding of ministry, because both of us have been in small churches, and we volunteer. We're assigned to our small church, country churches out in on the weekends. So how did this experience impact your understanding of a smaller church size and the way those congregational dynamics worked?
Yeah, well, I was pretty familiar with this congregation already, and these were randomly assigned. I didn't know which churches we'd be going to, before the class until the first day, but found out we'd be going to Messiah Lutheran Church, which is in the city, and that's actually the church that is connected to the Compass program that I work with.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I kind of knew some of the people there, kind of knew what they, had done. I'd gone to worship a few times last summer, and so I kind of had, a little bit of an idea, but again, having the whole week there, hearing from the one of the pastors on staff, it was just incredible to see what they were doing. And I think like one of the biggest things that I took away was that you don't need to be a large church to really make an impact, not only spiritually, of course, but also like within the community.
Sure, yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure this church probably is making sort of more of a positive impact in their neighborhood than many churches have. And it's, and the way that happens, and they went through the whole process, and it's like there was just sort of one step led to another. They tried to, again, do long-term planning, but it's like, they just kind of took things as they came. But again, they had people that took ownership of not only their church, but also their neighborhood and their community, and they said, we want to be, a force for good. And well, their mission statement, or their vision statement that sort of permeates everything that they do, is sharing life with our neighbors through the love of Christ. So that's kind of what shapes and directs all of their activities, and they've really done that. I mean, sort of through the church president, who also has he's a real estate developer, and he kind of started his own Lutheran real estate group, which pretty much operates like a regular real estate development group, but sort of with a bent towards reviving communities and stuff, because where they're situated, there's just dilapidated housing and bad landlords, and so they looked around, saw what are the problems that we have in our communities experiencing, and how can we help to alleviate that. And like with the Compass program that they've had, just this past fall, they had one of the families that was connected with the Compass program, otherwise unchurched, but they baptized the whole family, and now they attend every Sunday. And
that's great.
Yeah, so but really, it's not like it doesn't take a whole bunch of people, but everyone has ownership. And there's like 20, I think he said 20 or 30 people that are leading some sort of initiative, and then they gather resources and other interested people, but like everyone's sort of mobilized, and it doesn't take a huge multi-thousand member church, just people that are willing to sort of take ownership and get behind sort of a vision and seek to find ways to share Christ with people, the love of Christ with people. So that was really one of the big things that I took away from that. And that was really encouraging because most of the LCMS is about that size of like 120, 150 members. And, you might think, oh, I want to go to a bigger church because if they're doing, lots of great stuff, but, they're doing lots of groundbreaking things and, with what they have. And so that was really encouraging to see and helped me. I could really picture myself at a church like that,
Sure.
doing similar things. So that was one big thing. What was something that you feel like you took away from that first week at the small church?
A lot of the things you were saying, similar experiences for our class. It was, it's a church in a community that most of the people that live around there don't go to church, certainly don't go to that church. And so it was finding ways to put itself back out into the community to form relationships with the nearby people that lived there. So it was doing these initiatives with a school just on the next block, where the pastor and some other congregational leaders would either tutor kids or go and visit the school and form relationships with students that way. They were really close with the school administrator and the principal, and they were always on the same page with facility sharing and relationship building. So the principal has a vision for the community for it to become a positive. She wants the school to be seen as a positive place, and the church wants a similar image for themselves. And so the two of them kind of built this partnership, and it's part of a program that St. Louis has for churches and schools to be in sponsorship with one another. But this particular situation, the partnership was really strong. In addition to that, the church having been down to 50, 75 members coming regularly, when the pastor came in there, the one that spoke with us, their current pastor, he spoke with the congregational members, a lot of them older, really invested in the survival of the church, wanting it to continue on, not really at all any part of them wanting it to close down or sell the property or anything like that. And so all of them took a strong ownership in what the church wanted to be, what their visions for the future were. I can't remember the exact tagline that they had with their vision statement, but they really prioritize relationship in the community building going on. So they've got English as a second language courses being taught. They've just got sort of family fun nights where the adults can get some practical education. I don't know exactly what courses they offer, but things that can help them be a little bit more autonomous. And then the kids on those nights, they've got different activities and things for them to take part in too. So it was amazing to see all these different ministries that the church was kind of enabling to take place, even though it was a smaller congregation. Even now, it doesn't quite have 150 members, people worshiping there, but it's growing, and the community is recognizing who the pastor is, what the church is, what they're open to doing, and so definitely some of the same themes of making an impact and congregational sort of member investment in the congregation itself, in the church, and that really carrying through their perseverance in pushing through maybe low numbers so that they could continue to be an effective church.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like they've done a really good job at establishing trust with the community and the pastor establishing trust with his congregants. I mean, and to have that foundation laid is, so vital for sort of the health of a church and, allowing it to thrive no matter how many people, no matter what the numbers.
Right. Yeah. And at small churches, a lot of times the pastor doesn't have a whole lot of support staff.
Yeah.
In this case, I think there was sort of an administrative assistant or secretary, and maybe a couple other paid positions, but not a really big staff. But it really showed our class just how involved and how high energy and creative a pastor needs to be in that context.
Yeah.
Always being willing to try something new, always being open to new ideas, and trying to enable the church members to be involved in the new things that they were coming up with or ideas they had, and things like that. So
Yeah.
definitely a new picture of what small church pastor was for me. Having only the sort of rural context to look at, not that rural pastors aren't busy, they certainly are, but this sort of city context gave a different picture as to what the responsibilities can be for that leader.
I mean, in a lot of ways, no matter where a pastor is, his responsibilities and his mission and the mission of the church is the same, but yet it takes shape in different places and different times. And yeah, that was another thing we both had then, sort of urban inner city churches, and to see those similarities and differences. And what's funny is the pastor, who, like, he's like the most organized person I've ever seen, and that's what he's practically had to be able to get everything. Not a whole lot of staff, but yet when he came, he said, like, 10 years ago, I think 11 years ago, and his first Christmas Eve service, they had 19 people at church. He's like,
oh wow,
yeah, and he came from a church that had gone from 400 to 800 or something,
yeah,
and he went from there to this. He's like, oh man, this is different. But now, again, through sort of the slow process of building trust with neighbors and everything, it's had a healthy growth to 150. But he brought in the office manager, who spoke to us a little bit and said everyone there really values the intimacy that a small church can have.
Absolutely.
And it's not like they're all just aiming to grow just for the sake of growing.
Right.
That's been a nice byproduct, and of course we always want people to know Christ and for the gospel to get out, but yet they really saw themselves and valued their identity as a small place where it's not just where people can be, people are friendly, but people can really make friends and deep relationships. And that was really one of the big takeaways that I had with that small church dynamic.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point, because as we're going through this conversation, as we were going through class, and as I spoke with other, guys that were in there, so often we hear language about church growth and about more members and low numbers and high numbers. And it's tempting to think that it all just turns into sort of a numbers game, and that it's all just about how many people we can get into the doors and in the pews and listening to the service. But one thing I learned, especially in the small church context, not that large churches don't do this well, but for our lectures, it really came out, was just how much the pastor and the leadership within the church members is focused on caring for the people around them and putting forth this caring and invested and interested personality about the church itself. So it wasn't just a place with open doors, but it was a place with open doors that had people within it that were going out into the community and getting to know people, helping to fill needs. One of their ideas was to have a little tent up on the lawn during Halloween, which isn't really a churchy holiday. Sometimes we have a different reaction to that, where it's sort of
try and shy away from it.
Stay away from it. But they put themselves out there. They put some porta potties up and some water and just some sort of a rest stop, sort of a first aid station they had. And I think that particular event showed the attitude that the church had in a really good way, in that its goal was to get out and know the community, fulfill some of the needs of the community, and welcome the community, invite the community, of course, to join their church and to join their body of Christians, but not doing so in a way that was strictly focused on how many people can we get through the door. And it's so hard to talk about some of this stuff, talk about growth, without it sounding like all we care about is numbers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're presenting a truth that affects someone's eternal reality, and so the priority is everybody.
Yeah,
not just the most people, but everybody. So I really enjoyed that about the small church context, getting to see that level of commitment to a position and that level of involvement within all the different things going on in a church. So now, kind of switching to the large church, and your second week and my second week being at different churches. What about that week did you learn about ministry in general or church leadership? What kind of had the biggest impact on you that second week of class?
I think the biggest thing was that, with this church I was at of 800 people, 800 members, and I think they said they had 20 paid staff, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty big. And just, when you again, when any organization starts to grow, you need to have more policies, more standards, more procedures. And that was certainly true for this place. But again, they're not policies kind of aimed towards, solely for efficiency or anything, but always ultimately serving, the church and, its mission. And so that was interesting to see this large church try and function as a good organization, but also keeping its identity as like, we're still a church. We're not just a big business or anything.
Balancing faithful ministry with responsible organization.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much more of a, needed thing when you get so many people involved. And, I think one of the biggest things as far as like the senior pastor goes, it seemed like, he's kind of the guy that preaches on most Sundays, and he's of course the head of the staff. So he's sort of I think they likened it to like a small church pastor is sort of like a soloist, and sort of a medium-sized church, they need kind of a duet or a quartet, but the large church pastor is more of like the conductor of a symphony, of things going on. And I think that was a helpful idea, way to sort of understand things. And he was helping sort of direct and encourage and ask the right questions and put the right people in the right positions, so that all these different parts of what the church was doing could keep going. I mean, he's kind of the linchpin for the church's operation. He doesn't have so much of the hands-on like the small church pastor, though. I mean, when you got 800 people, you're not going to know everyone's names. I mean, that's one major difference, from the small church to large church.
Yeah, you've got that sort of family aspect in the small church, and in the large church, you've got families within there, and you do have the head of the church, the lead pastor kind of doing his thing up there. But yeah, some of the difficulties of relational ministry just have to take place at several levels at one time rather than all of them taking place in the one pastor at a smaller church. And that imagery, the musical imagery from, of course, Leading from the Second Chair, Bonham and Patterson.
Yeah.
Just a shout out to that book.
Yeah.
Just so that nobody out there thinks that, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
but
I did not come up with
they came up with that. But I thought that was helpful as well. Talking with the pastor at the large church we visited, he mentioned that he's more of a people person. He's more of a interpersonal, relational kind of communicator. But because of his position, he had to take on more of an administrative sort of overarching. He preaches a lot, and he's got a relationship with the congregation in that way. But he's not able to maybe do as much personal counseling. He's not able to do as many home visits.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that church, they had their pastoral staff, which was 3 or 4 guys, doing all the hospital visits, which isn't something every large church can do. And so some of those things that are typically thought of as pastoral responsibilities are kind of delegated out to either special committees within the church or groups within the church. Special staff positions maybe that, if there's a retired pastor in the congregation who can handle that particular facet of ministry, then maybe he'll take care of that. Some of the same reactions for me as well.
Yeah.
From large ministry, having to, the big balance that we mentioned before, how to handle being a large organization and dealing with that size, budget even, and dealing with that size facility, and the congregational attitude, the way that the church we were studying at kind of had it set up was that each service was sort of its own congregation. They had pretty consistent attendance at each service, And so relationships were being built within those services. So the Saturday night crew, of worshipers really got to know each other well and kind of function as a community within them. And so they were trying to model what the pastor out there called the small church model of handling large numbers, in that there were sort of congregations within this large church. And I don't, when you hear that for the first time, maybe you start to wonder about factionism and, are these services kind of acting independently of one another? And that really isn't where he was taking it, but rather when it comes to pastoral care and the family of believers, those relationships really were being cultivated in that setting of the regular attendance in a worship service.
Yeah, and I think that leads to maybe the biggest task of that senior pastor, that conductor of the Symphony of Things, is keeping alignment with, making sure everything's kind of aligned towards the church's mission, but yet there's so many different unique sort of niches that people can find. I mean, our church, they had like small groups, and they had sort of a neighborhood outreach, and they also had a school, and so lots of different facets, but yet making sure that everyone, knows that they're sort of working in harmony with the other ones, and making sure that these different facets of the church's activity aren't silos. They're not isolated,
right?
But yet there's a lot of overlap, and everyone, and again, he kind of lamented how they have 3 services, and how it seemed like there were 3 separate congregations, and he sees as one of his goals to not let the larger numbers, which again are a result of faithful service, again a byproduct of lots of good things, not wanting that to be a hindrance to the unity of the entire church. And he's still thinking of ways to make sure that there's cohesion even with a diversity of things going on. So I give him a lot of props. I mean, that seems like a very
definitely
nuanced task. Takes a lot of wisdom and discernment to be able to sort of, again, make sure everything stays aligned in all their different unique parts of the church's life. So that was definitely one sort of surprising thing that I thought of, how much time the pastor spends in making sure all of the ministries and activities that the church does stay aligned with its ultimate vision and mission.
Yeah, so let me ask you this now, sort of switching gears a little bit. Personally, after having gone through the course, the 2 weeks, a whole week at one small church, a whole week at one large church, and talking about these 5 different categories: teamwork, congregation size, governance, planning, and finances, what were you able to glean from this whole course about yourself, maybe, that you didn't know that was there before? Or what sort of ministry context are you more excited about, or more equipped for, or want to be more equipped for? What was the Paul Horstmeyer takeaway from this course?
Yes. Well, and again, we'll be called somewhere, we'll be placed somewhere, and we ultimately don't have a whole lot of control over where we go for our first call.
Yep.
But I think this showed me how I think naturally I would fit well into a smaller church, or like the medium-sized church, where I can really be more hands-on and meeting more with people and doing more of the one-on-one counseling and, sort of getting to know people, and then thinking of ways to get them involved, or where they might, fit in, and how they can sort of be a part of the church's mission. But I know there will also be administrative tasks, and those big decisions just scare the heck out of me. But I know those will be in in any church I'd be in. And so I think, but that's a lot more of the large church pastors' time, is those big picture, big idea, big decision type things. So I know that would be one area that I need to work on, is feeling more comfortable with sort of making those big decisions, and being able to, again, sort of keep everything in concert. But I think naturally, my natural tendency is towards that smaller church, which I didn't think I guess I just didn't know until I took this class, honestly.
Right. There's just certain dynamics of practical church leadership that you don't run into in a classroom setting. But what this course did is it showed us what is a pastor doing all day, every day for a whole week, and what does his monthly sort of, progress look like, or how does a sole pastor deal with the fact that he's got to be sort of the vision committee chair and the enabler of all these different things going on that our small churches were so active in their communities. But the pastor was a big part of that activity, whereas in the larger church, he certainly was a big part of what the church was up to, but there seemed to be a fair amount of autonomy within those organizations or ministries or the youth group or the health center or whatever.
It's like there's accountability, but there's also autonomy.
Yes,
he kept them accountable, but he also
wasn't in charge of each of those things.
Yeah, he didn't have his hands in the minutia and the details, which I don't know. I feel like that would be hard for me a little bit. I'd want to maybe have more of a say than be so hands off. I don't know if you would rather be more the hands on or.
Yeah, as far as what I took away from the course, to be honest, it was hard for me not to take it sort of for granted that we were able to be in this church for a week. So the first week, it was Thursday or Friday, and I was like, man, this is a long week. We're out here, we're learning about this church that we're not going to be in charge of.
Yeah.
And then it was like, wait a second, this church has given us the opportunity to come in here, take a look at their guts for a whole week, and talk to us about even bring members forward, real members, giving us their real opinions and hearing what real people have to really say about things that matter to them. And you're not going to get that in a classroom.
No.
You're not going to get that from just visiting a church on some Sunday. But the fact that this course gave us the opportunity to see the inner workings of churches, I thought was really great after kind of thinking about it for a bit. But I will say, seeing the amount of energy and just so much personal investment that went into all the different things went on in a small church from the pastor, it was a little intimidating for me, honestly, because it was like he was thinking about the well-being of all of these different ministries, all 18 of them or whatever it was, because each one of them had a significant amount of value to the well-being of the church. And in the large church, the leadership staff, especially the pastoral leadership staff, their responsibilities were a little bit more specifically articulated to their position. And so even in that reading that we mentioned earlier, leading from the second chair, I found myself reacting to that reading rather positively, and hearing about what the support staff at this large church was doing sort of was attractive maybe to kind of what I envisioned my ministry to be like. So wanting to be supporting of a lead pastor, wanting to put a good face on the leadership, group, and building relationships on behalf of a whole congregation and a team like that, I thought to be really interesting and really really engaging. So I guess personally, I realized a little bit more where my preferences lied, but also in that, when you kind of realize what maybe you don't prefer as much, that's an area where some growth can really take place. So certainly want to improve on those aspects of maybe pastoral leadership in the smaller church, and what we learned about how high caliber that position really is, which is sort of unexpected, unintuitive. But yeah, so that's kind of what I took away from it was, wow, these churches really are showing us their true colors, really talking to us about authentic membership, and willing to share our struggles and different topics and different areas of interest with us. And we're just random little students in here who probably look like we're uninterested. So really just a big thank you to both the seminary and those churches that they were willing to do that for us, because really we won't get the chance to do that. I mean, vicarage, you're part of a leadership staff, but you're not ever given the chance to just observe one.
Yeah, have that candid look.
And see, how they sort of abstract topics, governance and organizational
Finances,
models.
yeah.
How do those really affect a church?
Mm,
So that was my personal takeaway from the whole thing.
yeah. No, definitely. It was probably it was definitely one of my favorite classes so far. I think because it's done sort of what no classroom type of class could have really done.
It crossed some lines that really couldn't be crossed from within the seminary campus.
Yeah.
So that was our thoughts on the Leadership Immersion course. Thanks for listening in on what we had to share. Hope that you found it as interesting as we did. And we look forward to continuing season 2 of Ministers in the Making and bringing more of the seminary experience to interested parties from outside of it.
Yeah, that's right. Check us out on all of our different platforms. Share, tell your friends, maybe share this podcast with someone that you might know would be interested in enrolling someday. If you have any questions or anything, feedback, send us an email at ministersinthemaking@gmail.com.
Personally, we both share this on Facebook, so feel free to comment or share yourself. Otherwise, that's about it for today. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you next time.